Welcome into Clippers Talk. 137 days straight of Clippers Talk, mind you. I'm Adam Osland. We're going streaking. We're on a bit of a streak here. We have not missed a day since October 4th on this particular show on the YouTube side, which you can also listen to in podcast form. Just go to Clippers Talk OT if you want to find all these episodes, this extra stuff we do for you on the YouTube side in just an audio podcast platform. Just search Clippers Talk OT wherever you listen to podcasts at. Coming up here, we're going to have Justin Russo on. At Fly By Night is where you find him. But I want to start things off with a bit of a preview here. As the Clippers are in Milwaukee, starting the season back up tomorrow after the All-Star break. It's been a while. Any Sklar brothers making an appearance? Hopefully not. No, I like the Sklar brothers. J-Dog said, yes, sir. Appreciate you guys in here. Yesterday, if you missed it, or last night, we had brother of Jamal Christopher, Justin Wilson, on. And considering I started to say his Twitter handle was at FlyByNight because I got the Justins confused, it reminded me, hey, maybe check in with Justin Russo and see if he wants to come on today. People are going crazy. Too many days without Clippers basketball. I am too. I'll be honest. After like one day, I'm fiending for it. I'm scratching the walls. I'm having withdrawals like Ewan McGregor in Train Spotting. But I want to get into this game tomorrow because we haven't done a preview in some time, and I'm excited for this one. It's a big game. The Clippers do have 2 days off afterwards, so then they start a 3 of 4, but their next 7 games are on the road. Really, it's an 8-game road trip, as my guy Dime Dropper pointed out, since their last game was in Utah before the break here. So let's talk about the Bucks, who the Clippers, I think, got one of their best victories against earlier this season, 127 to 117, just 2 or 3 weeks ago back at the Dome. Really impressive victory when you contextualize that ball game where Giannis and Dame were on. Giannis had 36 and 13. Dame had 29 and 10 assists. They attempted 34 free throws. The Clippers didn't have Kawhi in the fourth quarter, and they still won by 10. Awesome performance by the Clippers. We'll already visit that a little bit here as I go through the numbers and the stats and the juxtaposition and just comparing these two teams and where they're at and where they've been at recently. Who else do we got in here? C's, Facts. Alex Webb said, what's up, Adams family? The Adams family. Da-da-da-da. What's up, guys? Okay, so Milwaukee is 13th in offense on the season. The Clippers are 19th. But if you go just last 10 games, or Milwaukee's 4 and 6, they're 21st on offense, and the Clippers are 12th. Now, it helps that in their past 10 games, Kawhi has played in 9 of those. The only one he didn't was that last game in Utah, where the Clippers came back down 20. The Clippers have the second best defense on the season. The Bucks are 11th, but if you go last 10 games, Clippers 13th, the Bucks are 23rd. So the Bucks have been getting worse in both areas as of late. We'll see if the All-Star break and a few practices helps them in these areas. It might. But the Clippers really just having slippage on the defensive side while getting better overall offensively the last 10 games. So why is the Clippers defense down in the last 10? Where on the season they have the second best defense, but the last 10 games they're 13th. It's really one thing. Opponent three-point shooting. Over the last 10 games, opponents are shooting a league-high 40.4% from three against the Clippers. So the fact that the Clippers are still 13th over this time is actually a positive to me. They should be way worse than that. The fact that they're 6 and 4 over their last 10, even while opponents have been shooting 40.4% from three over that time, that's a positive. They should at best be 4 and 6. They're 6 and 4. But so I wanted to look at, is it bad defense or the Clippers getting unlucky with just some fluky shooting and shot variance going against them? Well, teams are actually taking one less wide open three per game over this period against the Clippers. So I think a lot of this is fluky shooting. It's not that they're getting way more open shots. They're actually taking about the same amount of combined open and wide open shots. If you don't know the difference, a wide open three is a defender 6+ feet away. An open three is a defender 4 to 6 feet away. So it goes like this. Teams went from taking 15 open threes per game against the Clippers on the season, a defender 4 to 6 feet away, at 33.5% from three on the season, to taking one more, 16 open threes per game. And now all of a sudden they're shooting 39.8% from three over the last 10 games. They're shooting over 6% better while only getting one more of those shots per game. Doesn't seem like they're just getting way better looks. It just so happens they're knocking them down. On wide open threes, a defender 6+ feet away, they went from shooting 18 of those per game at 38.6% on those wide open threes on the season against the Clippers to one less per game at 17 per game, but they're hitting 44.1% of them over the last 10 games. So again, about a 6% increase on shots that are wide open the last 10 games versus on the season against the Clippers. Now, it is possible that the Clippers overall, the physicality hasn't been as good, leaving shooters with fresher legs to have these higher percentages on the same type of shots. It could be that. I don't know if that's the case, though. I think a lot of it is just shooting going against the Clippers, just like it probably has gone with them plenty of times where guys are missing wide open shots and the Clippers were fortunate. And now it's turning into some bad luck where they're always hitting them. And these things typically even out, and it shows you who you are by the end of the season as a defense when it comes to perimeter shooting by the opposition. Again, the Clippers are still 16-4 over this time, while they're shooting 36.8% from three, which is 11th in the league the last 10 games. It's not a bad percentage. It's better than where they are in the season, and it's been better since Kawhi has been back. Now, back to Clippers versus Bucks tomorrow. Lakers got the Charlotte Hornets tonight, and hopefully Mark Williams goes off against them. So what about pace? The Clippers are 19th in pace on the season. The Bucks are 9th. So they do play faster than the Clippers. That's just stylistically a difference. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a better ball club, but the Clippers do want to play a little bit faster because typically if you get into your offense quicker, you can catch the defense slipping a little bit. There is a benefit to that. Now, I want to see the last 10 games if there's any difference there with Milwaukee or the Clippers when it comes to pace. Milwaukee's been even faster, went from 9th to 7th in pace the last 10 games. The Clippers slightly faster, 19th to 17th. They both jumped up a couple of spots. Clippers 7th in rebounding percentage. The Bucks on the season are 22nd. The Clippers are 2nd in defensive rebounding. The Bucks are good there. They're 4th. So they're both closing out possessions pretty well and not letting you get a lot of extra opportunities up. But while the Clippers are just 18th in offensive rebounds, the Milwaukee Bucks are 30th. They are last in the league when it comes to offensive rebounds. That's one of the reasons the Clippers won that first matchup. They had 12 offensive rebounds, so the Bucks having 5, and they ended up getting up 17 more shots. That's also because the Clippers had a season low 6 turnovers to the Bucks 13, which isn't bad, but that's how they came through and won 127-117 over the Bucks just about 3 weeks ago back at Intuit Dome. Where are they both on the season, though, when it comes to turnovers? So the Bucks are much better than the Clippers in that area. Typically, they're about 13 turnovers per game, which is what they had against the Clippers the first time. They're at 13.6 turnovers per game. The Clippers, they're at 15.9. But if you go over the last 10 games, where Kawhi has played the last 9 of them, the Clippers are turning it over just 14 times per game, so about 2 less than what they typically do on the season. I've been saying all year, when Kawhi comes back, that is going to be, I don't want to say a cure-all, but that's going to be one of the quick fixes for all the turnovers. It hasn't been perfect, but 2 less per game over the last 10, with Kawhi playing 9 of those games, that's significant. What about points off of turnovers? Now, this is where the Clippers thrive. They are second in the league at 20.2 points off of turnovers per game. They just had 41 points off of 21 turnovers in that game against Memphis, and they had, I want to say, about 20, their average, against Utah the last 2 games before the All-Star break. The Bucks in this area, points off of turnovers, 29th. They are at just 14.8 points off of turnovers per game, but they are a little bit better in limiting their opponents when it comes to points off of turnovers. They're giving up just 16.9 points there. The Clippers giving up 18.4. Both teams bad in second chance points due to what I mentioned earlier with them being low when it comes to offensive rebounding percentage. Both bottom 10 in second chance points. Clippers, believe it or not, major emphasis coming into this season. Fast break points, quick buckets, playing faster, getting those hit-ahead passes going. As I see more people join the chat, I will get to your comments and questions here in just a second. But the Clippers are 7th in fast break points, guys. They're at 17 fast break points per game. I want to say last season they were at 14. That's a big difference. The Bucks, as much as they play at a faster pace, they don't get a lot of fast break points, which is interesting. They're 28th at just 12.8. They're both middle of the pack in opponents' fast break points per game, giving up 15. While both teams do get up about 21 free throws a game, in that first game, the Bucks took 34 bleeping free throws, and the Clippers 28. The Clippers went 28 for 28, though. The Bucks went 30 of 34. That's really good. In fact, that was way above their free throw percentage of being 29th, shooting just 74% at the charity stripe this season. So the Clippers got this outlier performance from Milwaukee at the free throw line. Giannis and Dame both had big nights, and they still found a way to win that game with Kawhi not even playing the fourth quarter. That was an awesome victory. What about points in the paint? Well, the Bucks have Giannis, right? They're going to body you. They're going to own the paint. Not so much. They are 28th at 43 points per game in the paint. The Clippers, 10th at 51 points in the paint. They are both top 6, though, on the other end when it comes to defense, to defending the paint. Paint protection out there. Spit it out, Osland. What about two-man combos? Let's talk about this. Your pick and roll guys. Here are the top assist combinations in the 24-25 NBA season. James Harden and Ivica Zubac are second, only behind Chris Paul to Victor Wembanyama when it comes to assists. James Harden has assisted Ivica Zubac 116 times. Second best in the league there with that two-man duo. You might think, well, what about Dame and Giannis? They got to be pretty high up. They're 17th. Dame has assisted Giannis 90 times. When they originally got Damian Lillard, a lot of the talking point was, how are you going to stop this team in the pick and roll? They're going to be lethal. They're going to be devastating. Unstoppable. No can defense. Watching too much Cobra Kai. It hasn't exactly turned out like that. They've been okay, but I would say underwhelming overall in that area. What about trade deadline moves for Milwaukee? So they brought in Kyle Kuzma. They gave up Chris Middleton, who was a monster for them back when he was healthy. And, you know, he was the second option and had a 40-point finals game against Phoenix when they won it in 2021. But he wasn't able to stay healthy the last few years. It's really a shame because I've enjoyed watching Chris Middleton, his game, and, you know, all business type of guy, but he just can't stay healthy. So they brought in Kyle Kuzma. So far as a Buck, he's been okay. 12 points in his first game, 13 his second game, 21 in a loss to Golden State. And last time out, I think, against Minnesota, he had 19. But he's not shooting it very well. He's 4 of 17 from the outside so far as a member of the Bucks on the season. And I do like Kyle Kuzma. I know a lot of you guys were interested in bringing him in as a Clipper. On the season, averaging 15 points per game, and really he's having a down year, shooting just 28% from 3. Like, he's a 33% career three-point shooter, but 28% is pretty woeful. He should be better than that. I thought, and I have thought for a long time, he's been one of the better defenders against Kawhi Leonard in the league. I I felt like the last time out, what did Kawhi end up with in that game against the Bucks? He had 18. He was 8 of 17, but he played good defense against him. I took note of it, just like I always have. Back when he was a Laker, I thought he was their best defender to use against Kawhi. So that's something to look for. Also, again, Milwaukee's 4-6 their last 10 heading into the All-Star break. They're just not playing great ball overall. But who have they lost to? Who have they actually played? Well, I mentioned the Timberwolves in that game with Kyle Kuzma. They would win that one late, 103-101. That was their last game before the All-Star break. Obviously, came down to the wire and they won the fourth quarter by 1 point. But before that, a loss to the Warriors. Before that, a win over the 76ers. Before that, a loss to the Hawks. A win over the Hornets. A loss to the Thunder, Grizzlies, Spurs, and Blazers. So they lost 4 in a row there to some decent competition. Obviously, the Thunder, top of the West. But, losing those games to the Spurs and the Trailblazers, and they got shellacked by the Spurs 144-118. And the Blazers have been hot, but the Milwaukee Bucks, they haven't been great since the Clippers kind of sent them in to this tailspin. If you look at it this way, Milwaukee had won 8 of 9 before the Clippers beat them. And that's another reason that win was so good. And since then, they are 4-6. So, yeah, the Clippers kind of took some of the wind out of their sails. Milwaukee was really on the upswing, but they beat some down teams, some bad teams when they were playing at that time and on that winning streak. So we'll see. I'll get to your comments. I'll get to your questions here. Appreciate you guys. Co said, hey, Adam. Not too bad, I hope. Kevin Porter Jr. revenge game. This is a good point. I didn't even look up how much he's played. I know he's played. I believe he's played so far in Milwaukee. Let's see what the numbers are. Let's see what the minutes are here. That could be problematic. Beauchamp revenge game for the Clippers. So he's played 2 games. He did have 11 points in that 1-point victory or 2-point victory over Minnesota, though, right before the break. He was 4 of 9, 1 of 2 from the outside, 11 points, 5 assists, just 1 turnover, 8 boards. He had a good game. So, yeah, KPJ, that's a great point. He likely will come out with a chip on his shoulder, looking to get at his former employer in the Clippers. Deca Fantastic said, full squad Clips, rotation will be fascinating. I agree with you there. Mio, let's effing go, as he usually says, with using a picture of me in the void. DDD Jackie said, hey, Adam, what's up? Yawning tears. I also think it was the absence of Dunn and his inspiration area of effect. In which part? Not having him against that first game against Milwaukee? Like they knew they had to overcome not having Chris Dunn in that game? Birds for Life all day said, Adam, I think it's due to pick and roll switching defense, which leaves Big Zoo and James guarding guards out beyond 24 feet. Problem is, they've been doing that all season. Birds for Life all day. That's nothing new. And yet, they are top 5 when it comes to opponent three-point shooting. They have been really good in that area. It's just the last 10 games where teams are shooting best in the league against the Clippers. So how can you say, well, it's this problem, but that's actually been a solution all season long? Like everybody in this league now has to guard around the perimeter some. You can't escape it. Thomas said, let's hope Clippers don't come out sluggish. Agree. C said, we usually don't play so good after time off. Hopefully that's not the case tomorrow. People complain when the schedule's too congested, then they complain when they have too many days off. Guys, let it go. I would prefer more days off. I mean, they went through a stretch where they were getting destroyed by 30 the second night of like 4 straight back-to-backs. So let's not act like I know you want the Goldilocks sweet spot with 2 days off after every game or just 1 day off, but even when they had 1 day off for 18 straight days where they played 9 games, they looked very gassed at the end. Oh god. They make $1 million playing game. Thomas, go find a cloud to yell at. C said, hope BS gets more playing time. Ben Simmons. We'll talk about him with Justin Russo in a little bit. This is a good number. This is kind of what I was alluding to, but I didn't have the number. Ice Cold Beverage said Bucks are 7-13 versus teams above 500. Thank you, Ice Cold. Ice Cold. Yawning Tears, the defensive rating going down. It's going to be okay. They're still second in defensive rating on the season. Oscar said, is AI Adam in second half form for the rest of the NBA season? I hope so. Yes, Yawning Tears, I have outlined what's going on the last 10 games. Maybe rewind it if you didn't hear the beginning. It's really just one thing that's hurting the Clippers. KPJ dropping 30, said free TV. Mio said maybe the days off rejuvenated the team's legs. Hopefully, and Ty added practice might help with rotations. Free TV said schedule being congested and too many days off go hand in hand because only thing league can't get away with is giving us 90 regular season games. The league has it out for the Clippers. Mio said 3-point shootout negatively affects players post All-Star weekend. Hopefully Norm is immune. Hopefully it goes the other way because he wasn't very good in 3-point shootout. It's just more fuel to the fire for Norman Powell. I could see that happening. Just some more kerosene on the fire that burns in him to want to prove everybody wrong out there. Yeah, it was a disappointing 3-point contest overall. Dame also wasn't very good. So 2 guys that may have something to prove. Oh, I see what you're saying, Yawning Tears. My comments getting separated was saying maybe Dunn's absence explains the last 10 games on defense going down. Yeah, now he's played the last 3 or 4, so he might have missed 5 or 6 of those games. I do think there's something to that because when I talk about the overall effect of physical defense and how it can take out your legs, and that could affect shooting numbers. So without somebody like Chris Dunn being there, yes, I do think that could have an effect. And maybe it's not just fluky shooting or completely fluky shooting going against the Clippers. I think there's a cumulative and a residual effect when you're playing hard defensively and teams are having trouble getting into their offense. It's just taxing and tiring. And therefore, your shooting percentages could go down, especially as the game goes along. But it really could just be shooting variance. It happens. It was the Clippers' turn. The shots started going against them. Free TV said complaining about congested schedule and too many days off literally are connected. It makes perfect sense to complain about both. League schedule office has Laker fans running it. Yeah, well, guess what, Free TV? The Lakers have a 6-8 coming up where they play the Bucks twice, Denver twice, 6 games in 8 days in March. That's the worst part of any schedule anybody has this year. So maybe we can snuff out the conspiracy talk. Because the reality of the situation is there's nothing you can do about the schedule anyways. It's not that I haven't complained about it in the past. I have. But when I saw the Lakers get 6 games in 8 days, that is brutal. Luca the cat. It's Tuca. I did not name my cat Luca after he went to the Lakers. It's nothing like that. I promise you. What do you guys think would be the perfect schedule? Can you tell me what the perfect schedule would be? The Goldilocks schedule for the Clippers? Because I do have schedule complaints. They've had, I think, 17 back-to-backs this season. I think that's more than anybody because they had one added after the fires in Southern California caused a rescheduling. Hence, the Lakers being the only game in town, the only game in the NBA playing tonight. They're taking on Charlotte because that was a game that was rescheduled. And that's why they're going to have those 6 games in 8 days in March, which really, that is critical. That is a really bad time for that to happen. Now, the Clippers still have 17 games in March. They have a tough schedule. But 6 and 8. Oh my God. No, you had a similar stretch, but not 6 and 8. The Clippers had, I think, 6 and 9. So, no offense, Free TV, but you said league schedule office has Laker fans running it, and I immediately was able to rebuttal that by pointing out that the Lakers are about to play 6 games in 8 days, something nobody else in the league is having to do this season. So your argument doesn't hold water. I'm sorry. Thomas said the 80s basketball go find a cloud to yell at. The game has changed, guys. Half court sets are just dumping it into your big men. Guys run 2 miles more per game. Like far more explosive movements, and players are already worn down from constant basketball on the way up in specialized sports. It's not the same game that you knew as kids where Michael Jordan would take the summer off to go golf. Ain't nobody taking time off now. It's year round, and it shreds their tendons and ligaments to the bone. It's much harder. In that way, it's much more physical. Running more miles is more physical. Making more explosive movements is more physical. Doctors have studied this stuff. Putting the wear and tear on your body as kids when you're playing year round all the time to try to get in means by the time you do get to the league, if you do, then you're already have a lot of tread off the tire. That's the difference. Let me check in with Mr. Russo there. Justin Russo should be joining us here in a little bit. Sent link to email. I think he had like a Verizon email or something. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. But in this case, it's like the angel before he fell and became the devil. It's an angel, and Justin Russo joining us here at Fly By Night. KNITE is where you find him on X. Subscribe to his Substack for exclusive reports, news, information, and great analysis. Justin, thanks for doing this here on Clippers Talk.
No problem, man. How you been?
I'm doing okay. Before we get to the Clippers, quickly, because it's been the topic du jour or whatever this week, your thoughts on the All-Star game. Are we doing too much still talking about it on Wednesday? Should we let it go? Is it that big of a deal? Or do you see real issues with it that the NBA needs to fix and there's a perception problem?
I don't think anyone should care about an All-Star game. Not in 2025, not in 2024, 2023. Other sports dealt with the same thing. NFL was the first sport that realized All-Star games no one cares about. MLB went to making the All-Star game determine home field advantage in the World Series, and still nobody cared because why would they? Like, why would from at that time, the Pittsburgh Pirates were terrible. Why would a player from the Pittsburgh Pirates care if the St. Louis Cardinals have home field in the World Series? Why would they care?
Yep.
NHL's tried all sorts of stuff, and this year NHL went to the Four Nations thing, which was really cool. But also, why should we care about All-Star games in general? They're meant to be nice little breaks in the season, but that's all they are.
I pulled this audio earlier, and I thought it was pretty damning, and I'm going to play it in here. I want to see what what you think about this, because I think a lot of people, the nostalgia heads, the nostalgia merchants, people saying, "Oh, the game was better back when they used to play hard all the time. They were diving for loose balls." Listen to this audio at the start of the 1990 All-Star game.
We're seeing some high wire acts already defensively, like nobody is going to play defense here today, but we seem to have some erasers.
Well, Dennis Rodman says, I want to turn this into a defensive game, and we'll see him come off the bench for the East.
Huh. So it sure seemed like even back in 1990, there was this perception that the All-Star game had zero defense being played, because to start the 1990 game, they're already talking about that. And Dennis Rodman was trying to change the narrative back in 1990. How about that? Strange, huh?
The more things change, the more they stay the same, as I guess the old adage. So, nothing has changed. I mean, I don't think players should really care all that much about an All-Star game.
The outrage has changed.
Has it? Because I feel like we just see it more rather than like the sheer volume of it is obviously different. I just don't think the rate at which it happens is all that different. We just see it more now.
I agree to a point, but there weren't the hot take editorials back then like there are today. While the 24/7 news cycle does completely change things.
Well, I can tell you why. Because people back then actually liked the sport they were watching.
Fair. I agree with you. I think
the NBA has just become all about transactions and drama to this point that I think that's kind of what people kind of feed off of. And I think we've lost the forest for the trees, so to speak.
I think there's something, though, to people getting off on hating and negativity and being cynical and thinking you're smarter than people who, run the league. Like, they get ratings off of talking about how bad the NBA ratings are, because you get a bunch of old heads going, yeah, it was better back in my day. And they get to romanticize the past, because back when they were watching the NBA then, they were in their prime too. Movies, music, everything was better to them, because that is what nostalgia and golden age syndrome is about. You're romanticizing the past. So I do think there is something to specifically hating on the NBA sport more so than any other one. And it's also about, there's an underlying debate going on, which is Jordan versus LeBron. And to prop up MJ, you have to prop up his era, and vice versa. So that plays into it too. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the nature of what we deal with now, right? Is everything in the past was better, whereas everything today sucks. I mean, look, maybe people are propping up the era of Jordan to help him in whatever mythical battle against LeBron that I don't even know why people really care about the Jordan versus LeBron stuff anymore. I was talking to a Clipper player about 2 weeks ago who said, why do we never talk about Kareem in the all-time great discussions? Why is it always just Jordan and LeBron? So, I just kind of view it as, I genuinely think that the All-Star game for the most part is fine. I actually like the format this year. I like the basketball that was played in between the 3-hour ad break that took place.
Yeah, I think that was the problem. They actually got the guys to compete, and then they muffled the actual basketball, or they muddied it up to the point where you didn't even realize, oh, there was a 3-hour program here, and I only saw 33 minutes of basketball. That's insane.
In between a Kevin Hart special.
Yeah, it was special, all right. It was something.
Which by the way, Shea looked absolutely livid with
him.
Yeah.
Wrap it up, B. Wrap it up.
Yeah.
That's what he was telling him. Okay. Crazy. We can wrap up the All-Star game talk. We're about to start Clippers basketball tomorrow against the Bucks. Do you have any concerns this team is going to come out and look rusty? Because a lot of people here in the chat are going, hopefully we didn't get too much rest. And my point is, guys, we complain about the schedule being too congested. Then we complain about them having too much rest. Like, which is it? Come on. You can only, I've complained about the schedule. I think there's a legitimate gripe, but you can only take it so far.
To answer your question, I'm not worried in the sense that I think they're going to be a bad team when they come out of the break. I just think they're going to kind of be like what we've seen in years past, where there are going to be some pitfalls, but also they're going to look good at times. I think there's no linear process into being good out of the All-Star break for this team because they are an older team. I think the one thing that we've kind of lost in terms of viewing the trade deadline is talking to players during the season. They liked all the athleticism and the youth on the team. Some of that athleticism and youth is gone. Now granted, Bones Highland didn't play that much, and Terrence Mann was out of the rotation by the time he got traded. But at the same time, those were young athletic players, and they replaced him with Bogdan Bogdanovic, who's 32. They replaced him with Ben Simmons, who, while athletic, is obviously not at the athletic peak that he was when he was, I can't believe I'm saying this about a guy who I believe is 28, but in his peak, in his prime. So, they replaced him with some guy, and like obviously Patty Mills and Drew Eubanks are not exactly the most athletic, although Drew Eubanks can jump pretty well for dunks, so that's good. But they did get older. They did get older. They're not as athletic as they were. So I'm generally interested to see how a team like this, who did get older, not as athletic, kind of fares come out of the All-Star break. And the one thing I've been kind of rattling around my head in the last few days is when we got to the trade deadline, there was the thought that they didn't have enough guys, right? Like there just wasn't enough rotation players.
Right.
Viable rotation players is what I should say. Today, they might have too many.
Yeah.
They unquestionably can go 11 deep. They shouldn't, but they can.
So if this team's fully healthy, who are the first 4 guys coming off the bench for you?
So it's going to have to be Bogdanovic for sure. I'm sorry. My dog is squeaking a toy because he now thinks he's the most important thing in the world. Bogdanovic, Coffee, Nico for sure. And I'm probably forgetting someone, but Simmons, I guess, would be the 4th. Is there someone I'm forgetting? I feel like there's someone.
Where's Chris Dunn?
Oh, yeah, that would be the one that or Derek Jones, I guess, if Dunn starts.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good question. That's a good question, though, because, like, what's the alternative at that point? Like, the first 4 off the bench, one of those guys has to be out, and I don't know who it is. I guess naturally you would say Nico to preserve him for the playoffs, but Nico's archetype is not repeated by anybody else on the team.
Yeah, like you could say against certain matchups, maybe Drew Eubanks makes sense some nights, and he's a situational specialist guy. And maybe Nico is the same depending on how you view Ben Simmons and if he can really guard 5s. Because he can't do what Nico can, obviously, on offense. Nico can't do what he does either. But on defense, can he replicate Nico's small ball 5 potential?
Yeah, so that's the key, right? Like, obviously he's not going to shoot like Nico, but if you can do everything else, I think that kind of makes them somewhat redundant. Not all the way redundant, but somewhat. And maybe then you split up their minutes to where, all right, you don't need 20 minutes of Ben and you don't need 20 minutes of Nico. Can we do 10 of each? And then kind of like, so the big thing with Ty, right, is as we've observed over the years, is first half, he genuinely will have a 10-man rotation. Second half, it usually will either go down to 9 or possibly even 8. He will trim it quite a bit. So I don't think it's like what you see in the first half of a game is what you'll see in the second half and vice versa. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they kind of combat this stuff because, Chris Dunn deserves to play. Derek Jones obviously deserves to play. There's 4 guys who we are guaranteed of are playing 30 minutes a night. And it's James, Norm, Kawhi, and Zoo. And some of those guys are getting to 35, 36 minutes. In the case of James, maybe 50 on some nights. But, so there's not a lot of minutes left to go around for ancillary pieces.
Do you like Free TV saying they should go 10 or 11 deep to preserve our guys and reduce chance of injury and exhaustion? I think that on paper it sounds nice, and what the Warriors were doing to start the season sounded nice, but it's also hard to keep guys in rhythm doing that. And it's hard to be as competitive and to be as good. If you're not playing your best guys more minutes, that's going to hurt you. I understand there's a balance. It's regular season. You do want to preserve them, but what are your thoughts, Justin?
So I guess the pushback against the idea that it's not a good idea is just OKC. They play like 12 guys a night, and they're incredible. Now, then again, their best player is better than any best player on the Clippers. And their second best player on a lot of nights, Jalen Williams, is probably better than the Clippers' second best player on some nights. So, and their depth, their overall depth of talent is better than what the Clippers have at this point.
So they're an outlier.
Yeah, I would say OKC is an outlier. However, what I will also say is I don't think the idea of playing 10 to 11 people is wrong, especially in the regular season, especially when you have as many back-to-backs as the Clippers do. The most back-to-backs in the league. Granted, they've played quite a few of those up to this point, but Kawhi's not playing in back-to-backs. So, like, this situation's actually going to, like, kind of figure
out.
it. Yeah, it's going to figure it because Ben Simmons isn't playing back-to-backs. Kawhi Leonard's not playing back-to-backs. There might be a back-to-back or two. I know he doesn't like to sit, but there might be a back-to-back or two where James sits or even Norm sits to preserve him from the heavy workload he's had. I mean, you look at the schedule coming out of the All-Star break. They have three back-to-backs until mid-March, which is at Indiana, at Detroit. Then they have at Phoenix, and then home against Detroit, and then they have at New Orleans, at Miami. They're not terribly hard back-to-backs.
Yeah.
But you're playing a Milwaukee team that you're playing an Indiana team that loves to get out and run. You're playing a Detroit team that is not bad. They're actually quite good. And then, so they're going to have to figure some stuff out, but I do think it will get figured out naturally where guys aren't going to play both games. So minutes are going to be a little bit more dispersed than we probably would see otherwise.
Do you have any concerns because you brought up who's going to get 30 minutes each and every night? With the addition of Ben Simmons, do you have any concerns that Zoo's role gets lessened a little bit because Coach Lue loves his small ball and he has found a guy who can be like a real linchpin in that role and a real connector for him?
Not really, only because we've seen the importance of Zoo. Now, there are going to be games where Zoo...
Hey, I've seen the importance of Zoo long before this year, let me tell you, and he still wasn't playing heavy minutes.
That's fair, but my pushback on that would be he's actually grown more important than we've seen in recent years. He is quite literally what makes their defense go for the most part. And without him, their defense is not as good. Granted, Ben Simmons, the first game with Ben Simmons was about as big of a grand slam as anyone could ever hit. It was a World Series level grand slam that they hit in just the first game.
Oh, it was Freddie Freeman, huh?
Yeah, they don't win that game without him. I think that's very easy to say. However, what I will also say is if you actually look at that game, Zoo played 25 minutes, and I don't think he played any of the last 17.
No,
I have to go back and
once he came out after that first stint in the third quarter, I think he was out the rest of the game.
That is actually correct.
Except for one time at the free throw line for rebounding purposes.
He checked out with 5:52 to go in the third quarter. He did not return until 1 second to go in the fourth, and then he didn't play after that either. So he really did not play after the midway point of the fourth quarter. So he'd already played 25 minutes, which tells you how large of a workload he had even in that game. And at high altitude, second night of a back-to-back, big men can get tired. So I also view it as that they also played very well in small ball lineups. So why would you go back to him? And that's nothing against him. It's just how it is. So
he also was hunched over and gassed at one point in that game.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
if
there's anyone who deserves to be gassed this season, it's probably Vita Zubats at this point.
Yeah, and that's residual from last season, the season before that, and every year with how many minutes and how reliable and what an Iron Man he's been for this team. What's your ideal small ball lineup with Ben Simmons, and what do you think Coach Lue is going to lean into most?
So the small ball lineup, any small ball lineup that has to be successful, pretty much requires Kawhi Leonard to be out there. I think that's just at least for the duration of a season, right? Like you can get by a game or two, but for the season you need Kawhi. So Kawhi will be out there. Ben Simmons, obviously, because he makes sense. I also think Nico makes sense because of spacing, shooting, and decision-making as a one-touch passer. That's very important for that type of lineup. And then I would say Norm and James. So James, Norm, Kawhi, Nico, Ben, because you can switch 3 through 5. And also James supplies post-up defense, which I know sounds like a weird thing to say, but a very good post-up defender throughout his entire career. And Norm will at least compete defensively. Now, perimeter defensively, it can get a little problematic. However, if Kawhi is Kawhi and they get him to the level that they need to get him to, and he shows what he's capable of, coming back from everything, that's your A1 perimeter defender. So, and Nico is very good at fighting over screens. Ben Simmons is good at fighting over screens. So there are some perimeter defenders, but I think that would be the small ball lineup to see. If they do need more perimeter defense and kind of more ancillary playmaking, Chris Dunn in place of Ben Simmons would probably be the go-to, at least for that, as far as on-ball perimeter defense.
I got a question for you. So over the last 10 games, teams are shooting their best from three against the Clippers.
I heard you say that, by the way, on a recent podcast.
40.4% from the outside over the last 10 games. On the season, the Clippers' perimeter defense, or at least what opponents are shooting from the outside against them, has been very good. They've been top 5 in opponent three-point shooting. Do you think this is just shot variance? Because I looked into the numbers, and if you combine open and wide open threes, they're taking the same amount against the Clippers as they have been. They're just shooting 6% better than they were in the past on the same type of shots. Do you think it's that simple, or have they been missing Chris Dunn a little bit? Has there been some slippage physically on the defensive end because of all the days and, 9 games in 18 days they just went through? What is it?
It could be an outlier. It could be the sign of something more. They gave up a lot of open corner threes, if I remember correctly, in Phoenix when I went there. I believe that falls within the last 10 games, right? The game at Phoenix, that feels like it would.
During the 3-game losing streak, I think.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. So that's a big problem. They've given up a lot more corner threes, I think, during this, at least based on my eye test. I haven't looked at the numbers. It feels like they've given up a lot of corner threes. They also gave up a lot of corner threes to Utah, or at least early on in that game they did. So it could be shot luck. It could also just be the fact that they're giving up a higher quality of look that teams are hunting.
I didn't check corner threes. That's a good point. It could be that.
Well, it's also kind of funny because if you actually also look over the last 10 games, another team. So the Clippers are 6-4 over the last 10 games, even despite giving up that level of shooting, right?
Which is great.
You know what's crazy? Denver's 8-2 while also giving up 39% of threes. So, and for the season, Denver's about middle of the road in terms of 3-point percentage for opponents. Clippers, I believe, are in the top 10 of that. So it could just be a blip for both teams. And the reason I bring up Denver is because Denver doesn't shoot a lot of threes. They primarily live inside the paint for the most part. But the way that I'm looking at it is this time of the season, you do see kind of wonkiness with numbers, but could also be defensive drop off. And the Clippers in recent games have kind of gotten by just getting a lot of steals, so that they have back-to-back games with at least 16 steals recently. So, I'm kind of curious because now that you bring it up and we're talking about it, I'm actually kind of curious coming back. Milwaukee likes to hunt threes, or at least has in the past. So I'm kind of curious what they're able to get. Now, the archetype of Milwaukee's team has changed because they got rid of Chris Middleton, who historically has been a good three-point shooter. And they got Kyle Kuzma, who has had good three-point shooting seasons.
Not this
year. It's been hot and cold. So I'm very curious to see how defensively the Clippers try to match up with that.
And I'll say this, Denver overcoming teams shooting 39% against them the last 10 games from three. Well, they have the number 1 offensive rating over that time at 126. So
also what I would say to people is if it's go look at who Denver has played during that time too.
Yeah, always important to contextualize it. People want to know, and I want to know this too, but can Ben work next to Ivica Zubac? Are there 3 guys that can make that work for those 2 that you can put around them?
I think so.
Why?
Because I don't think I think it's different from how it's been in the past with Zoo. I think Zoo, even compared to last season in lineups with non-shooters, I think he's gotten better at dissecting and making reads. So I feel like the bump there from him allows him to play in lineups that we would never have thought of before. Now, they did try Ben and Zoo together at the beginning of the second quarter, It didn't go well. They were -7. What I will say to that also, though, is the first minute of that lineup featured Kobe Brown. Nothing against Kobe Brown, but in that lineup, Kobe Brown was the small forward, and he was alongside Nico and Bogey. Though that was the lineup. It was Ben, Bogey, Nico, Kobe, Zoo. It went -2 in about a minute, and then I think Norn came in for Kobe, and they were like -5 in 3 minutes, which isn't any better. But the thing that I think makes them fit together is because we've seen Zoo as a short roller passing to someone in the dunker spot. He did it with Russ a little bit last year. He's done it in the past. So I think there is something there. What can get wonky is if you play a third non-shooter. Kobe Brown isn't. Yeah, Chris Brown, Chris Brown. Wow, Chris Dunn, Kobe Brown, guys like that. You need an actual floor spacer and shooter. You have to have 3 above average to high quality shooters on the floor with them at all times.
So you get Kawhi, James, Powell out there next to Ben and Zoo. You're going to be all right. You should be all right in theory.
So this is
you don't think
so? So this is a weird answer. I don't think so. I think because
of James and him.
I actually think because of Kawhi and him.
Tell me.
I think Kawhi requires the ball more in that lineup than, like, for instance, if you have Kawhi in that lineup, you don't need Ben. Because the upside of having Ben in that lineup is, he basically, Ben needs the ball at times, but Kawhi needs the ball all the time. And you already have James on the floor with him together. So you're basically 3 guys. And if you add in Norm, that's 4 guys who need the ball, or at least to touch the ball.
Too much high usage guys out there. I can see that. Say Batum instead of Kawhi or Bogey.
I would like Nico instead of Kawhi in that lineup, or even Bogey too. But Nico specifically, I think, fixes a lot of problems that some lineups can present. Yeah. He really is the Swiss Army knife, like, of a lot of things, because Nico's not high usage. He's a good decision maker, smart defender, can guard 5s, can guard on the perimeter. And the other thing is, when he is used in pick and rolls, he's a very smart popper, but he's also shown, even as he's gotten older, that he can get to the nail and make distributions from there.
Yeah, and I think Ben has some of that Nico connecting passing in him, not just when he's on the ball a ton and dishing and being the floor general, but you saw that pass he had to Nico, that quick touch pass off the feed when he flashed into the paint from James Harden for Nico for 3 in the second half of that game against Utah. Like, I don't know. I'm probably putting too much into one game against the Utah Jazz with Ben Simmons, but
yeah.
What about this
argument? It's hard. It's hard not to get excited though, like when you see stuff like that. But you also do have to, like, dial it back, because the way that I framed it in my mind too is Ben Simmons on a buyout should not be this important. Like, so we have to scale it back a little bit. Like, if he gets 10 minutes a night, can he make an impact in that role? And then scale up from there if you have to.
But they needed a backup 5. They needed a guy who could handle the rock and pass, and they kind of got 2 birds, 1 stone going on with Ben Simmons. Like, it's an interesting fit. And I just wonder what a new, culture, locker room, franchise with stability can do for him, because he's never really been in one, if you think about it. Like, Philadelphia didn't get fixed because he left. The Brooklyn Nets they've been a fluid situation the entire time he was there. They went from being championship hunting to capture the flag hunting. Like, there's been a lot of change and turmoil that was completely outside of anything going on with Ben Simmons. I just wonder what this could do for him.
It's funny. I've talked to him. I talked to him in the locker room. Let's see, when was their last home game? Wednesday? Yeah, because they played Thursday in Utah. Right. I actually talked to him because he told me he was going to play Thursday in Utah. And he seems almost at peace, like, when you talk to him, which I've heard that in the past that hasn't been the case as much. So, but I could also just be putting a lot of stock into a conversation I had with the guy, for 10 minutes before a game. So I do think this locker room helps insulate him. There's not a lot on him in terms of it's okay if he has a bad night. It's not going to kill the team. Yeah. Whereas in the past, making $40 million if you had a bad night, it can kill the team in a lot of ways. And I'm trying my best not to put too much on him because he is a buyout guy. I think at the end of the day, we have to you are what another team dictates you as, right?
Yeah.
And we've actually seen that with Russ in a lot of ways. I don't mean to bring him up, but it is what happened, which is Russ took a buyout from his massive contract, and all he's been since then is a minimum contract guy, which is the nature of how teams intend to view players at this point. So, and it is hard not to read too much into one game, especially against the Utah Jazz, but there were a lot of positive signs. I think you're going to see on this upcoming road trip. They don't even come back home until March 5th, which is insane to think about.
Yeah.
You're going to end up seeing the real story of what Ben can or can't do for the team.
Yeah, somebody in the chat is disagreeing because he's saying Ben can be a connector and play off the ball, but it's like, guys, how much can he really do off the ball, though? I do think he can do some of that stuff, but it can be a problem because he's not a shooter out there. Like, you have to understand.
So, I do agree that he is a connector, but I don't view Ben in the same way as a connector as like Nico. Right. I view him as having the ball a little bit more is good. Ben is a quick decision maker. That is a very positive and high value thing. The issue, I think, is that Ben is going to need in terms of seconds and time on ball, he's going to need the ball more than a guy like Nico would. And so I'm genuinely curious to see what transpires from just that in lineups where maybe he does play alongside James. It obviously went well in Utah, but I'm curious to see what else happens down the road.
It's funny because when he first came in that game against Utah late in the first quarter into the second, but when he first was out there with James Harden, he was basically just being used as like the accelerator to get it into the half court faster. He'd bring it up really fast and then just give it up to James Harden. And so they'd have more time left on the shot clock, and it was that simple. Now it's his first couple of possessions as a Clipper, but even just playing with a little bit more pace, a little bit more tempo out there as the Clippers have wanted, he does provide that. I mean, that's good for them.
Yeah, so that's a very valuable thing because James has been worn down against pressure ball handlers or pressure defenders as a ball handler in the backcourt. So Ben supplies that. Chris Dunn supplies that. But I think Ben supplies a quicker, more physical version of that, which is valuable to a team that at times can get bullied off the ball.
Yeah. Is it time in your mind for if Kawhi's going to continue to get 34 minutes or thereabout, maybe it goes up to 36 eventually, for him to be averaging 20 per game now, 20 plus per game now? Is it that time? Yeah.
I think it's about that time.
Because he's 15 games in, and there was a little bit of concern heading into that Memphis game for me, just with how gassed he was looking out there.
I mean, to be fair to Kawhi, time off is always good for him. So the more time off he gets, the usually better he looks in season. I don't mean like when he's coming back from something, like injury wise.
Right.
But, he puts up 25, 5 and 4 against Memphis. He's had other good games. It's kind of funny because Kawhi's weird where like he'll come back and then he'll have a game that's really good within like his first couple games back. And he kind of distorts your perception of what a guy should look like coming back from something as serious as he came back from. So I talked about earlier, progress isn't linear for teams. It's not even linear for players. So he's going to have peaks and valleys, but I genuinely think we're actually going to start seeing him go on the upswing over the next couple of weeks, just because this is the time of year he usually does it.
Do you think this Clippers team is ready for this end of season schedule? I think they have like they're fifth in strength of schedule. They have the fifth toughest schedule in the league. Do you think they can hold up against that and hold on to having a top 6 seed? Because I was talking about this last night with Justin Wilson, and you look at one team that's coming right now and has it's like a bottom 5, one of the easiest schedules in the league remaining. That would be Minnesota. And they could jump in and cause a lot of havoc between the Clippers, the Lakers, and themselves with who ends up in that game of musical chairs being a top 6 seed and who ends up coming out of the play-in.
I think they can hold on. A lot of it also comes down to health, but we've seen that for a lot of teams already thus far this season where things come down to health. It comes down to certain kinds of luck factors that are baked in. Minnesota is the one team who, when you look at them, they're the team that can not only catch the Clippers. Well, all Minnesota has to do in general is just catch the Clippers. They don't need to pass them. Right. They have the tiebreaker. So as long as they catch them, that's it. However, Minnesota's recent string has also somewhat been tied to the fact that Julius Randle hasn't played. And I'm very curious to see what happens when he has to come back into the fold. Like what happens? Do they just not start him again? Because their best lineups all year, even when he played, have not involved him.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a decision that they have to make. I'm genuinely interested in the Minnesota Clippers race, but also there's another race brewing. And I know it sounds crazy to say this. I think the Clippers can catch Houston.
They are in a free fall currently.
Now, can they pass them is the question.
They have the tiebreaker against the Clippers like everybody.
Yeah. So they're going to have to pass them. They're 2 back in the loss column of Houston. But as weird as it sounds, the 4 seed is in play. And they would want to get home court if they can. It's going to be the 2 games against the Lakers that are coming up are the biggest games they'll play for the rest of the season.
How much stock do you put in the Lakers being a contender in the Western Conference this season with the Luka addition when they still weren't able to go out and get that big because of the trade being nixed with Mark Williams, who they'll see tonight?
I mean, my crazy take is I think there's like 7 contenders in the West.
But OKC is still a cut above? Like they separate themselves?
OKC is a cut above, but like OKC is also very matchup dependent, I think, when they get to like a conference finals or maybe even the second round. I don't think OKC wants to see Denver in the second round, for instance.
Yeah, I agree with you. They do have everybody's flawed, and that's why there's so many possible contenders in the West, right?
And that's why it's fascinating. I remember in the preseason thing, it might have been you and I talking a couple times in preseason where I was like, I think there's one really good team in the West and everyone else is just extremely flawed and we got to see what happens. And we're kind of there. Like Memphis is flawed. Houston's flawed.
Oh, yeah.
The Lakers have flaws, as well. Denver does as well. Their defense is not good, but they also still have the best player in the world, and that matters.
Do you view the Lakers, though, as better this season since the trade, even while losing the guy who I think he had him 6 points per 100 possessions better whenever Anthony Davis was on the floor and obviously was their best defender?
I mean, honestly, I think they are. Because as great as LeBron has been, I also think we have to mention the fact that he is 40 years old. And if you get another guy who can do what he can do at a level above at this point of his career, I think that takes off a little bit of the burden from him. The Lakers are just going to they're going to be a disaster defensively, but I also don't know how much defense matters anymore.
I mean, to win it all, traditionally, you got to be a good defensive team still.
That's very fair, and it has traditionally been the case and historically is. But also, I think we've entered the era of the NBA, like Denver recently, when they won their title. I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember where they ranked defensively, but I don't think they were viewed as this great defensive team.
They might have been just outside top 10. I'm checking right now because I agree with you. That was the one team that was like, Denver. So they won in 2023, correct?
That sounds right, yeah.
They were 15th.
Yeah.
But
so
that is the outlier, but it's not nothing because it's the modern game.
But their offense was so damn efficient, it didn't matter what their defense did. Yeah. Like at the end of the day, that's kind of the thing, right? Is you have to do one thing at an elite level, and the other thing has to be at least at an average level, I think, to be a true contender. The Clippers defended at an elite level. Offensively, they're slightly below average, I believe. But since Kawhi's been back in the fold, they've been about league average. There's just so many flawed West contenders, man, that like it's kind of crazy. Like, I will say this: there are 2 teams I do not trust in the West playoffs this year that are in the top 6. It's Memphis and Houston.
I totally agree.
Those are the 2 teams. I think any other team in the top 6, if they saw Memphis and Houston, they would do backflips. I think they would just get them out in like 5 games, maybe 6.
people have been arguing with me in here, not recently for some reason, but they have been arguing with me during the season when I said, I'll take Houston in a first round matchup over the options that are out there. And everybody goes, well, what do you mean? You lost to him all 3 times. I'm like, okay, Kawhi didn't play in any of those games. Who are their top end talent guys with playoff experience that you fear for averaging 30 a game in a playoff series? They don't have them. Like, they are missing a go-to guy in a pecking order, I think, still.
Their clutch time offense, and actually just in general, their half-court offense is so porous and so hard to watch that you genuinely fear for them in a playoff series if there's a close game. They have elite athletes. Their defense is incredible.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where it stops. Their offense, you know, Alperen Şengün, phenomenal player. But their perimeter guys are not the type of efficient perimeter players that I think give opposing defenses who have time to game plan for a series enough pause and worry. Memphis, for me, is a different story. Memphis and Houston are joined for me in the, I don't know if they have enough shooting department. That's like a thing for me as far as they're concerned. But for Memphis, their lack of shooting is a little bit more troublesome in the fact that they play a traditional center. Granted, he's a rookie, but they play a traditional center. They then bring in Brandon Clark, who cannot shoot. If Jaren Jackson moves to the 5, he generally will get into foul trouble as the big man, as the lone big on the floor. Ja Morant can't shoot. Yeah. And I know that sounds mean to say, you just can't shoot.
And Luke Kennard can't guard.
They're 2 most important players, and I felt this way for a while, so this isn't just me on the Ja thing. Their 2 most important players are Jaren Jackson and Desmond Bane. Ja Morant doesn't even feel, for large stretches when I watch them, doesn't even feel like he's as needed as he was like 2 or 3 years ago.
Not at all. He's averaging 20 per game now, you know? That's down from, I think he was 26 a couple of years ago.
But even like stylistically, it almost seems like they've moved on too.
They're passing way more than they were, I guess. Like, their passes per game are way up.
And they're trying to hunt threes a little bit more. Like, Jalen Wells has been fantastic for them as a rookie. I mean, if we held a Rookie of the Year vote at this point, I think I might give him number 1. Like, he might win it for me. He's been that vital and important for a team that's that high in the West. But you look at the rest of their team, is like, who truly scares you outside of Jaren Jackson to a degree and Desmond Bane? I mean, Ja Morant getting downhill, yes, but teams are going to go under every Ja ball screen. They're not going to care about it. And I'm worried for them in that aspect.
Like, Ja will have a game where he looks incredible and unstoppable and as dynamic as anybody in the league, but it's not sustainable, I don't think, over a 7-game series. I'm not overly concerned about it. I think they have a low ceiling. Rockets too. I just, Ime scares me most on the Rockets, honestly. Out of any, forget the players. Like, I think he's a good coach. I do. So if those are the 2 teams you're least worried about, the 2 you're most worried about, OKC and Denver?
Yeah. I think it's like OKC, and then right below them is Denver, and there's a gap. I do generally think there's a gap after Denver.
Yeah. I don't even know who would be next there. Like, it might be the Lakers, honestly.
It could be.
For me, it's just that high-end talent can be devastating.
They have 3 elite perimeter players, and that's hard to match up with. You know, defense be damned as far as they're concerned.
Yeah. That's kind of when a team like commits to that much offense, it worries me. It scares me with that level of talent. Like, oh, they're really just going to try to do this and outscore teams, and they actually have guys who might make that possible.
Yeah.
That's what I look at with them.
I mean, they shoot, you know, they have 3 guys who shoot very well from 3 as elite perimeter players and decision makers, mind you, and rebounders. They all do everything. Granted, like I keep mentioning, their defense isn't good, but they still have some good defensive players. Dorian Finney-Smith is a good defensive player. Jared Vanderbilt, when he's on the floor, is a good defensive player. So there are options for them. Honestly, the Lakers might just end up having to play small and just Let the chips fall where they may.
They're going to have to win by imposing their will and playing small, most likely. Last question for you here, Justin. I want to get your overall view of best case, worst case scenario with the Clippers in these last 28 games. So I saw you retweet this from La Murray breaking down the schedule. They got 12 of those games at home, 16 on the road. 5 games with 2+ days of rest. 6 games with 0 days of rest. They still got to play Detroit twice, New York twice, Cleveland twice. 18 of their 28 games are versus teams with a winning record currently. What do you think their record is the final 28 games of the season?
I almost said 15-13. That seems low, though.
I mean, they're 8 games over 500 right now, so that wouldn't be terrible.
Because that's what 15 would put them at 46.
Yes.
Wow, that's like if you would have told the Clippers before the season they would have had 46 wins, they would have taken that.
You would have told Ben Simmons, he would have had an aneurysm.
Yeah. So let's
Not
see.
Ben Simmons, Bill Simmons.
Oh, Bill Simmons. They have 14 games with the East left, right? And they're 11-5 against the East right now. So that'd be 14.
Well, they got games against some of the better teams in the East now.
Yeah, but half their games remaining are against the East, which is kind of crazy because the reason Memphis pumped up their schedule or their record quite a bit early in the season is like their first 32 Memphis games, like they split it 16-16 against the East and West. So it was kind of wild. I remember looking at that. You know what? I'll say 16-12.
Ooh, that's exactly the number I had. But now I'm almost feeling like 15-13 is more realistic. We're really going to have
15-13 is way more realistic. But
there's 17 games in March coming up, and 6 back-to-backs left. Or 6 games. Yeah, 6 games with 0 days left, 0 days rest.
So even if you assume that they lose those 6 games. Let's just say they lose every second night of a back-to-back, hypothetically, right?
They split them, yeah. So there's 12.
So that's what, 6-6 if you just split them?
Yeah.
Which I mean, they obviously could do worse than that. They could go like 3-9. You never know. Yeah, I mean, man.
A lot of this depends on Kawhi. Like if Kawhi gets back to looking like last year's version and an all-NBA second-team guy like he was last season, then you're in business. Then 16-12 is very doable.
I mean, the other thing we have to factor in, and I know this sounds kind of crazy, but like this is why predicting like quote-unquote second-half schedules is also very hard. What teams are they playing at the end of a season that might actually just not be trying to win? Like they play Orlando at the end of March on a second night of a back-to-back. Who knows what Orlando's going to look like by then? They haven't looked good over the last 2 months. New Orleans is definitely not trying to win. Dallas, who knows by that point of the season? They might be at the back end of a play-in. San Antonio, who they play at the end of or at the middle of April 8th, they might be out of the play-in race and just not playing guys. You know, Sacramento, same thing. Golden State, same. Like we don't honestly know. Like there could be some resting that takes place when you get to that juncture of the season. You know, I'm looking at this game. Oh God, they play Charlotte March 16th. Huh? That'll be fun. It's a great game for that. You know,
I do think Sacramento falls out. I think Dallas has a good chance of falling out. AD might not even be back. Phoenix could stay out. I could see the Spurs getting in. Yeah.
So what I will say is the Spurs are 2 back of 9 and 10 in terms of the loss column. I don't think they've actually looked good since the De'Aaron Fox trade.
They've lost some tough ones, man.
Yeah, they just haven't looked as good as I think people thought they would. I would not be shocked to see if San Antonio gets to that point of the season, if they're 2 or 3 games out, it's just like, you know what? Like, we're going to get another lottery pick anyways. They get one from Atlanta, and they would have one of their own as well. Maybe they just decide to punt for that. Hey, the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, they could get him too. Everything's possible with the San Antonio Spurs are in the lottery these days. But you end up looking at like that time of the season gets a little wonky in terms of prognostications just because teams do rest guys when they think that they need to bump up their lottery odds. What I will say in that case, though, is the top 4 in the lottery are basically solidified. No one's catching these teams. No one's catching Washington, New Orleans, Utah, or Chicago. Toronto tried and couldn't do it. Like they literally could not do it. Those teams out-tanked everyone. It was incredible. But yeah,
and Brooklyn started off hot this season.
Yeah, Brooklyn started off hot, tried to tank, realized they couldn't do it, and then Jordy Fernandez was like, "Hey, let's win 3 in a row going into the break."
Yeah, bad idea.
By the way, Jordy Fernandez, very much in the Mark Daigneault mold, where while his team is terrible, you understand how good that team will be if they get some actual talent.
Yeah, that's a team that will be retooling, I think, very soon here. They have the assets, they have the means to do so. You brought up Atlanta for a second. I wanted to run something by you. Is Trae Young at all in the Clippers' upcoming plans? Yes?
Yes.
This bogey move was a real chess piece to getting Trae.
Oh no, I don't think the bogey move was the ultimate. Just like what's funny is I was talking to someone. This is before Ben Simmons got bought out, and the quote that was relayed to me from this person was, "Very sneaky pickup by the Clippers to get Patty Mills." And I said, "Why?" Well, if Ben Simmons gets bought out, that's his kind of go-to. And I was like, oh, okay. And then Ben Simmons got bought out, and he ended up here when apparently the other option was like Cleveland, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. Maybe you bring in friends and you just play the friend tour. They're doing it in reverse. Because remember, they had Paul George, and then they got Paul George's friends.
Yes.
Now, if you just get the guy's friends, you can get the guy.
This is the appropriate way to do it, I would say.
Exactly. This is what was this the Kentavious Caldwell Pope theory with the Lakers when he was with Clutch and he signed that huge 1-year deal, and then the next offseason LeBron signed because Clutch got to see how nice the Lakers were to KCP or something.
Yeah, maybe Giannis's brother is on the way at some point too.
I'm gonna call this the Clutch corollary is what I'm gonna refer to this as from now on.
The point, though, we made last night was I don't think the front office, at least traditionally, views Trae as the right type of guy to build around because he's a small guard, and they've tried to go away from that in Lawrence Frank's, assessment and philosophy of how to build a team. But they're kind of running out of options, maybe, like who's really going to be available, and therefore it might just be, hey, do you want a star or not?
So that's what's eventually that's what it will come down to. And their plan for 2026 started last offseason, as we all know, with the Paul George decision, by not giving him the 4 years or the 3 and the no trade clause. They've honed in on 2026. Trae will be a free agent in 2026, I believe. He's one of the massive free agents for that class, which will be.
They're not going to let him go hit free agency, though, right? They're going to trade him before that.
You would imagine. Then again, who knows anymore? Luka Doncic got traded for whatever he got traded for. We're outside of the realm of reality of the NBA these days.
Nico ruined all reasonable conversations.
Any Laker fan can post a jersey swap now. We can't say anything to them. It's incredible. But getting back to the Trae point, what I will say is they've positioned themselves for 2026. The number one guy on their board, unquestionably, is and was Luka Doncic. That was the guy.
Yeah.
That was the number one target. Jaren Jackson ranks very highly, but I anticipate Jaren will re-up with Memphis probably this offseason, in fact, which is also why I think Ja Morant gets traded. There
was a recent report, and then they came out today and denied it.
So I had heard in the weeks before the All-Star break that this was something that Memphis was going to have to look into doing. They don't want to do it, but they're going to have to eventually look into doing it because they're not going to be a luxury tax team down the line. And they do need to retain Jaren. They have Desmond. They're going to have to pay Santi Aldama, which I know sounds like a weird thing, but they do have to pay him. He's been very good this year. He's going to be a restricted free agent. Ja does have 3 years left on his deal. All 3 years are guaranteed. There's no player option. So they don't necessarily have to trade him this offseason. This could be an offseason of 2026 type move, but it is something that's coming down the line. But in regards to Trae, he's in the class with Luka, Shea, Jaren, and it's himself. That's a big class. Some of those guys are going to re-up. I expect Jaren to re-up, obviously. I expect Shea to re-up. I'd actually be stunned if Shea didn't.
My theory has always been it would actually help the Clippers in getting Shea if he won a championship in OKC this year or next. Because then he could say, I fulfilled my end of the bargain. Now I can go wherever I want. And maybe he'd come back to LA.
Maybe. I mean, you never know.
But it could also be, hey, they traded me. Why the hell am I coming back there?
That's the big thing, you know. But with Trae, I think it could come down to a case of who else is there.
Yeah.
And the value on Trae, you know, a year from free agency might not be as high as people think. The Clippers, when they get to the offseason, are going to have another first-round pick to trade. I think they can trade. I think they could go, 2030 trade, 2032 trade, swap 31, I think. I think that's what it can be.
Yep.
And they will have salary to send out as well.
And they just worked with them. They just worked with Atlanta a second ago.
I mean, not to get too far down the road, but this will also come down to James.
Yeah, he's got the opt-out.
He can opt out. He can throw a wrench into some things too. I mean, I know he wants to stay. But at the end of the day, business is business in the NBA. But also the Clippers are in the what's the word I'm looking for? Not friendship business, but they're in, you know, they don't want to screw people over to a large degree, you know.
They don't want to burn bridges. They want to be a stable franchise where you're an appealing place for superstars.
I mean, maybe the other thing is they just wait for someone to hit free. Maybe Trae just hits free agency. You know, maybe Trae gets traded this offseason somewhere.
Okay.
Doesn't re-sign.
I can see that.
And just walks in free agency and the Clippers are there.
Well, that'd be ideal.
I mean, Keith Smith, who I love as a Cap guy, and you know, when he tweets this stuff, he always has a meme that he posts. It's a Simpsons meme of "Don't make me tap the sign," and it's cap space can not only just be used for signing players, you can also use it to trade for people. So always remember that too. When you get to 2026, if a star doesn't become available, maybe in terms of free agency, maybe they can just absorb one into cap space as a trade.
And you pointed out recently, I think, in a tweet that the Clippers could have the upwards of $70 million the summer of 2026.
Yeah.
That's with Kawhi still on the books, right?
That's with Kawhi still on the books. When you end up looking at it, Kawhi, that season will make $50.3 million. That's with no James on the book, which if he returns, it could be with a player option. You never know. But, you know, Bogey has a team option, which they could decline. And if they decline that team option, if they decline the Kobe Brown team option, and Chris Dunn has a non-guaranteed deal for that year. But if all of them end up walking, you can actually get up upwards of 80 million in cap space if all three of them are gone. By that juncture, you don't have any guaranteed salary at that point. So, you know, there are options for them to kind of pivot as needed, which is what they wanted. Their key phrase has always been optionality. So we'll see.
I'm interested. This is going to
be honestly, everyone I talked to, they were not going to punt this season. I think people thought they could by trading players. They were not going to do that. They don't believe in it. They want to win. And I've said this even in preseason on various podcasts that I was on. I know people like to think of it as a joke. They value 13 straight winning seasons. That's a big deal to them. And they're 11 wins away from 14?
Yeah.
14 straight winning season. So that's a big deal to them.
Longest run in the NBA over that time.
Yeah. And actually what's crazy is when you end up looking at it, God, I looked at it the other day. It's like, I think there's only like 3 or 4 other consecutive winning season series that run longer than that.
Because before it was the Spurs for like 20 years who had the longest running winning streak in the NBA, in NBA history.
22 years for the Spurs. The Utah Jazz had 19 from 86 to 2004. The Lakers had 16 from 77 to 92. If the Clippers get to 14, they will be in a 4-way tie with the Blazers from 90 to 2003 and two 14-year Celtics runs from I believe the 50s, from the late 50s from 1956 to 69, and from 80 to 93. So they'd be in a four-way tie with them. There'll only be 3 longer winning streaks in the history of the NBA. Like, it's kind of mind-boggling when you realize how awful the Clippers franchise was before this streak.
Well, and I think of it also as what happened before Ballmer is irrelevant in some ways. What happened when you had an owner who was actively working against the best interests of the franchise, of being a winning franchise, doesn't matter. If ownership is the biggest advantage in sports, then the Clippers were at a disadvantage for over 40 years. So you got to look at this team in some ways, not quite as an expansion franchise, but they're a newer franchise over the last 11 years now with Steve Ballmer.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to look at it from that point of view, right? It's like they've been trying to play catch up over the last 10 to 15 years, essentially. And they haven't caught all the way up, but when you look at the winningest teams since like 2012, 13, they're right there. It's them and Golden State.
Yeah, they have been a model of consistency and one of the best run franchises in the NBA, where I've seen Laker fans pine over how the Clippers do things in their front office.
You know what I will say? They remind me a lot of, do you remember when Dallas, before they won the title? Like all those years of just like
coming up short.
Yeah, bashing their head against the rock over and over.
Dirk can't do it. They lost in that first round in 2007 against the We Believe Warriors team. They choked away a 62-win team.
They lost to the Spurs, I think, in the second round one year when they had like the 2 best records in the West at that time. And it was that weird division winner has to be in the top 3 thing. So the Mavericks had to be 4th, which was insane. They remind me of that, which is, a lot of people put value in the title itself, which is very fair. Obviously, you play to win a title. No one's going to disagree with that. But there is a lot of value also in being consistently good and finally breaking through, giving yourself enough chances to break through eventually, which is oddly enough kind of what's happening in Oklahoma City with Sam Presti. Everyone keeps expecting OKC to take the swing for the fences with all their picks on, some secondary superstar to go with Shea. But Presti's model is you basically stockpile and you keep going year after year until you break through. Now, is that the best model in the world? I don't know. But the Clippers have tried the all-in model and it didn't work. So now they've slightly pivoted, and we'll see what this does.
When people criticize what happened with the Shea trade and, they shouldn't have done it and why'd they do that and the guys can't stay healthy and all this, I look at what is available in the future, and we're now talking about just getting Trae Young. It's like, this is why they did it, because those opportunities are so rare. You had to do it then, because now they're not happening very often at all. It's going to be very difficult, even more difficult to get one of those guys. So to say that the Clippers made the wrong move is like, no, that was good process. It didn't work out.
Lawrence Frank has talked about it quite a few times, and maybe people won't like the idea that's parroted, but basically it's getting a superstar is the hard part. It's getting everything else around them first and then figuring out which guy fits. That really is the hardest part. So getting the superstar in, as he said before, they've done the hard part. They need to get everything else, in order. And I think what we're actually seeing now is the inverse of that, which is they're trying to get everything else kind of built around and then just insert the guy you need.
Yeah, completely. And even with the guy who they already have internally right now, the way this team was constructed was, hey, we're going to have a high floor. And then if we get Kawhi, who knows what can happen with a healthy Kawhi Leonard.
And I know people didn't like the fact that Lawrence Frank said that they viewed Kawhi Leonard coming back as their trade deadline acquisition. And I get it. I get why people like anytime you hear someone say that, you're like, of course, here it comes, But I also think that's just generally how they legitimately thought is if we're in a decent position before he returns, we have a chance with him. They view Kawhi, and maybe rightly or wrongly, they view Kawhi as the ultimate difference maker. They view him, maybe if he's not on the absolute Jokic level, they view him right below that. Where if he's on the floor, they have a chance, and that's all they ever want.
And I think everybody else does too. Like that's still the hope. That's what everybody still holds on to. The Clippers' playoff hopes are still hinged to the right leg of Kawhi Leonard. That's what it comes down to in the end.
It's the hope that kills you, isn't it?
Don't give me hope. He is Justin Russo. Some really emphasize and say Russo.
Yeah, like I'm French Canadian, from Montreal or some shit.
Like I'm
Quebecois.
I may have accidentally started this. I hope
that's fine.
I hope your family hasn't heard this. And they're like, why are they so disrespectful to our family name?
I've actually been asked about it by one of them, and they actually just think it's funny. So
okay, good. Good sport about it. Before we get out of here, I do want to remind you, Clippers Talk is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. It is the easiest way to play fantasy sports, and it's available in over 30 states. All you got to do is pick higher or lower on your favorite player stats or your least favorite player stats, and you can win up to 100 times your money, make picks, win money, and I got a free promo code for you guys that will give new users a free pick and up to $1,000 in bonus cash. The promo code is LAC, and you can find it and the referral link in the description down below in this very episode that featured Justin Russo. Justin, where can everybody find you? Where can they subscribe for this good work and analysis that you're putting in daily for the Clippers?
You can find me on Twitter, or I'm never referring to the other thing. It's Twitter. FLYBYKNITE. I'm also on Blue Sky by the same handle if people want to go there and view that as well. And Substack, justinrusso.substack.com, where I am churning out. To be fair, I took a all-star break myself, so
Any particular articles coming that you got something, some irons in the fire, something you're working on that people should get prepared for?
I've been trying to work on a story about Clippers challenges, like how they go about challenging things on calls on the floor. So,
yeah, they're but they're like 12 above 500, right?
I haven't looked at the number in a while, but they rank pretty high in terms of like percentage won. I know there's a stat that's been floated out, which is very true. It's no one challenges more and wins more challenges than the Brooklyn Nets. Jordi Fernandez just challenges like anything he wants, but he wins a ton of them. It's actually kind of wild. So I plan on talking to the person who makes the decision on whether or not they should challenge. And shockingly, people have come to find out it's not Ty Lue.
Well, yeah, Carlo talks about this a lot on the broadcast. So I want to say the record is something like 22-10 or 22-11 on challenges or something in that area. But yeah, no, I think that would be very interesting, especially when you add in the Halo board effect on challenges, what they are at home versus on the road, because they have that advantage there with the four different camera angles.
I have it. The last thing I had it jotted down was January 14th, which tells you how much research I've done since then. They were 18-9 on challenges by this time, like a month ago. So
yeah,
obviously they've challenged since then. But the NBA actually puts out, I don't know if you've actually seen it, the NBA puts out a sheet of every single call that's been challenged in the NBA.
Oh, wow. Is that on NBA.com?
Yeah, you can end up going to the, it's like the official NBA, whatever thing that it is. And it's like a PDF form. But if you actually go on there, this is kind of fascinating to me. If you actually go on there, it lists it by who challenged and everything. It's very detailed. But in the far right column, they actually give you a link to where you can go copy and paste it into your browser to see the play.
Huh. That's kind of wild. Very cool. Yeah. NBA innovation that is being overlooked by the haters everywhere, especially during the All-Star break. He is Justin Russo. I'm Adam Oslin. This has been another edition of Clippers Talk. Episode 138, I think 138 straight we got, or 137. I can't keep track like the NBA does with challenges.
Move over, Cal Ripken. Yeah, AC Green's got nothing on you either, buddy.
I'm trying here. We'll see how much longer this goes. This episode, though, is over, ladies and gentlemen. It's over. Until tomorrow with the pregame show starting at, I think, 4. That game tips off at 5 Eastern time zone wise against Milwaukee. I don't want to make you have to look this up.
No, it's
either way.
5, yeah.
Pregame right back here at 4. Clippers in Milwaukee taking on the Bucks. I'm Adam Oslin.